Representative Jeb Hensarling is a Republican of Louisiana, and he went on CNBC to talk about flood insurance. And of course, this is in the wake of the disasters in Texas and Florida because of Hurricane Harvey and Hurricane Irma. So let's see what he has to say here.
Another challenge we have is these repetitive lost properties. And so, for example, we have one property outside of Baton Rouge that has, a modest home worth about $60,000. It's flooded over 40 times. The taxpayers have paid almost $500,000 for it. In Houston, a home worth about $100,000, flooded multiple times. Taxpayers have now paid $1 million for it. At some point, God's telling you to move. But at some point, the taxpayer's got to quit paying and you've got to move. You've either got to make that home more resilient on the front end or you have to relocate it out of the flooded area. And that's the reforms that we're trying to get done in Congress now. But it's tough because you have a lot of people, a lot of these communities are concerned about the loss of their tax base. Some people look upon this as essentially a form of entitlement spending to have federal taxpayers subsidize their premiums. And so this is tough political sledding. Right now, we're under a short-term reauthorization of the program. I hope we can get these reforms done. Anything?
Imagine bitching about flood relief money at a time when the government just passed a $700 billion military budget. That means we're spending as much now as we did during the height of the war on terror when we're full scale in Afghanistan, full scale in Iraq. There was an increase in the military budget of over $80 billion. Trump only asked for a $54 billion military spending increase. The Democrats gave him $80 billion. So we're spending $700 billion, a giant military splurge. Nobody says shit about fiscal responsibility or deficits, or debt, or, oh my God, we have to pinch our pennies because we don't have the money to afford this. Nobody says anything about that. But where do they care about, well, we can't afford this? Fucking flood relief money. What kind of a loathsome scumbag do you have to be? And furthermore, guys, these are politicians who haven't seriously updated our infrastructure in a responsible way since the New Deal. So we have an old crumbling infrastructure that gets a grade of D+ according to the Society of Civil Engineers, which means old drainage systems, shitty dams and levees. So we have these out-of-date systems in place for when you get a once-in-a-100-year storm, which Houston has had 3 of them in the past 3 years. By the way, a lot of this has to do with climate change as well. So these guys refuse to spend the money to update the infrastructure. And then when there's inevitable flooding, they turn around and say, we don't want to pay out on the flood relief money. Just move. God wants you to move. You couldn't craft a political party in a lab that's more against regular people than the Republican Party. Oh, it's unbelievable. And then furthermore, from the climate change perspective, too. These are people who repeatedly vote to give billions of dollars in subsidies to ExxonMobil and big oil every single year. And then we have the chickens coming home to roost in the more powerful storms that are a result of climate change. And then again, their response is, we don't want to pay for your house just got flooded. You don't need flood relief money. Forget, we got to change the system. And you know what his brilliant solution is? It's amazing that he brings this up in public and he's not embarrassed. His brilliant solution: a privatized system. Hey, jackass, you want to know why we don't have a privatized system already when it comes to flood insurance? Because the for-profit insurance companies refuse to get involved in that business because they'll lose money. So it's not like nobody's ever thought of that. Of course, people have thought about, hey, let's have private flood insurance and not government-backed flood insurance when you're close to the water. Of course, people have thought of that. But the private health insurance companies are like, we're not going to do it because we're going to lose money. So he brings up this solution, which we already know nobody's going to go for, or the private health insurance companies aren't going to go for. He's not interested in forcing them to do it. So he's just talking out of his ass and trying to find a goddamn excuse to not pay out on the flood relief money. He is such a fucking scumbag, man. Imagine being that guy. I'm the guy that goes out on TV when thousands of people, hundreds of thousands of people, lost their livelihoods to a flood. I'm the guy that goes out on TV and says, we shouldn't give you flood relief money because, you know, dollars and cents and fiscal responsibility and stuff. Do me a favor. If you're not going to talk about being a deficit hawk in the context of cutting back on our 900 military bases around the world, which costs $100 billion a year just to maintain, if you're not going to talk about being a deficit hawk in respect to the $700 billion military splurge that we just did and the military-industrial complex, shut the fuck up. We're not interested in where else you want to save money because conveniently it always happens to be off the backs of middle-class people.